Germany stunned by America's P-47 8.50 cals and their FW-190s were outgunned. The Americans and their oversized fighters, they'll be easy prey for our FW-190s. We shall see, Herr Oberst, we shall see. March 15, 1943. Luftwaffe Operations Center occupied France. Oberstleutnant Werner Hoffmann set down his coffee cup and picked up the intelligence report with 2 fingers, as though the paper itself carried contamination. His face, weathered from years of combat over Poland, France, and Russia, twisted into a sneer. "Look at this," Hoffmann said, tossing the report across the mahogany table toward his subordinates. "The Americans are sending over another heavy fighter, the P-47 Thunderbolt, 7 tons of airplane trying to dogfight." Major Klaus Richter, Hoffmann's wingman and closest friend, leaned back in his chair and laughed. 7 tons? Our FW-190s weigh half that. They'll fly circles around these American pigs. Hauptmann Ernst Weber, the unit's intelligence officer, shifted uncomfortably in his seat at the end of the table. He was younger than the others, promoted rapidly due to his analytical mind rather than combat prowess. "Gentlemen, if I may, the report indicates the P-47 carries 8 machine guns, 8 Browning .50 caliber weapons. The combined firepower is unprecedented." "We should consider," but Hoffmann waved him off with a dismissive gesture, his iron cross catching the morning light. 8 guns on a 7-ton cow. It will be too slow to catch us, too heavy to turn with us, and too clumsy to escape us. Our FW-190s have proven themselves superior in every engagement. At Dieppe, we shot down 61 British and Canadian aircraft for 6 losses. At the Schweinfurt raid, the kill ratio was 4-1 in our favor. Just last week over the Channel, we destroyed 9 American bombers without a single loss. He stood and walked to the window overlooking the airfield where a dozen FW-190s sat in neat rows. "The mathematics are undeniable. German engineering and German pilots equal German victories." What Hoffmann didn't know, what none of them could have known as they dismissed the intelligence reports in that comfortable operations center, was that the P-47 Thunderbolt would systematically destroy the Luftwaffe's fighter force within 18 months. The numbers would become catastrophic. American kill ratios would reach 7, 1 then 10, 1 then in some engagements 15, 1. American production would exceed 15,000 P-47s, while Germany struggled to build 20,000 FW-190s total across the entire war. American pilots would claim over 3,700 aerial victories in P-47s alone. The confident laughter in that French operations center would become history's most expensive miscalculation, measured in the lives of 15,000 German pilots. The 3 men in that room represented the Luftwaffe's future in miniature. Hoffmann, the experienced ace with 47 victories, embodied the old guard's certainty in German superiority. Weber, the thoughtful intelligence officer, represented those who saw the warning signs but lacked the authority to force change. And watching from the corner was Lieutenant Franz Kohler, a young pilot with 16 kills who had just returned from engaging American bombers over Bremen. Kohler had seen something the others hadn't: the massive size of the American bomber formations, the endless waves that kept coming regardless of losses, the industrial weight behind each raid. These 3 men would witness what came next from very different perspectives. One would die in the skies over Germany. One would survive to document the catastrophe. And one would face the American Thunderbolts directly and live to testify about their devastating effectiveness. But on that March morning in 1943, confidence ruled. Hoffmann had earned his certainty through blood and victory. He had flown Bf-109s over France in 1940, watching the Luftwaffe sweep the skies clean of French and British aircraft. His squadron had achieved a 5-1 kill ratio during the Battle of Britain. In Russia, the numbers became even more lopsided. At the Battle of Kiev, German fighters destroyed Soviet aircraft at ratios exceeding 10-1. Hoffmann personally shot down 11 Soviet fighters in a single week. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. The FW-190A, introduced in 1941, had proven itself the finest fighter aircraft in the world. Its BMW 801 radial engine produced 1,700 horsepower, giving it a top speed of 408 miles per hour at 20,000 feet. It carried 2 7.92 machine guns in the cowling, 2 20mm cannons in the wing roots, and 2 more 20mm cannons in the outer wing panels. Rate of climb, 2,350 feet per minute. Service ceiling, 37,400 feet. Roll rate, superior to any Allied fighter. British test pilots who flew captured FW-190s called it the best fighter aircraft in the world. Recent American failures reinforced German confidence. The P-39 Airacobra had been a disaster. Its 37 cannon impressive on paper but unreliable in combat. Its performance above 15,000 feet abysmal. The P-40 Warhawk couldn't compete with German fighters in Europe. Early P-38 Lightning deployments in North Africa had shown promise, but also vulnerability, with German pilots learning to exploit the P-38's compressibility issues in high-speed dives. American heavy bombers, despite their fearsome defensive armament, were being slaughtered over Germany. The Schweinfurt-Regensburg raid in August 1943 would cost the Americans 60 bombers in a single day. The second Schweinfurt raid in October would cost another 77 bombers. The Americans were bleeding, and they knew it. Hoffman had studied every American aircraft type. He knew their weaknesses intimately. "The Americans build quantity," he had lectured his pilots numerous times. "We build quality. One German pilot equals 5 Americans. One FW-190 equals 10 American fighters. When they send their new P-47s, we will destroy them the same way we destroyed their P-40s and P-39s. His combat record supported this confidence. 47 confirmed victories. The Knight's Cross with oak leaves. 3 years of continuous combat without a serious wound. He had survived when thousands of others had died. His wingman Richter had 41 victories. Their squadron had produced 8 aces, men with 20 or more kills each. The mathematics of their success were documented in gun camera footage and wreckage scattered across Europe. But Weber's concerns were based on data that others chose to ignore. He had compiled production statistics that told a disturbing story. American industrial output was accelerating. In 1942, the United States produced 47,836 aircraft of all types. Germany produced 15,409. The Americans were building not just more aircraft, but more factories, more trained workers, more of everything. Weber's reports documented American aluminum production exceeding 900,000 tons annually compared to Germany's 234,000 tons. American aviation gasoline production, 30 billion gallons annually. German production, 4 billion gallons. "Gentlemen," Weber tried again, "the production numbers suggest production is a problem for factory managers, not fighter pilots," Hoffman interrupted. "We are discussing combat effectiveness. In combat, the FW-190 is superior. That is what matters." Lieutenant Kohler sat silently, remembering his most recent mission. They had intercepted a formation of American B-17s over Bremen. Kohler had made his attack approach perfectly, diving from above and behind, cannons ready. But what he remembered most wasn't the combat, but the sheer number of bombers. They had shot down 7, but the formation kept coming. 24 bombers had been damaged, but they continued to target. The Americans absorbed losses that would have ended any Luftwaffe mission and kept flying. When he mentioned this to Hoffman, the Oberstleutnant had dismissed it. "They're brave but foolish. Bravery without skill equals death. We're teaching them that lesson daily." The mathematics seemed irrefutable that March morning. German fighters were superior. German pilots were superior. German tactics were superior. Victory was simply a matter of time and proper execution. What none of them understood was that mathematics was precisely what would doom them. Not the mathematics of individual combat, but the mathematics of industrial production. The mathematics of 8.50 caliber machine guns firing 850 rounds per minute each. The mathematics of 15,000 P-47s versus Germany's entire fighter production. The mathematics of American waste exceeding German maximum effort. Farmingdale, New York, January 1943. Alexander Kartveli stood in the Republic Aviation Factory and watched P-47 Thunderbolt number 847 roll off the assembly line. The factory floor stretched for a quarter mile. Assembly stations positioned every 60 feet. Each station adding components as the aircraft moved through production. This single facility produced 14 P-47s daily. Every 90 minutes, another Thunderbolt rolled off the line, ready for combat. In June 1940, America produced just 287 military aircraft monthly. By December 1941, production reached 1,900 monthly. By June 1942, 4,500 monthly. By January 1943, Republic Aviation's Farmingdale facility alone was producing 420 P-47s monthly. This single facility was producing more fighter aircraft than Germany's top 3 fighter plants combined. The P-47 production line employed 23,000 workers operating 3 shifts daily. The scale of the operation defied pre-war imagination. The assembly process consumed 8,500 pounds of aluminum per aircraft. Republic received aluminum shipments of 120,000 pounds daily. Just the aluminum waste from this single factory exceeded Germany's monthly allocation for fighter production at several smaller facilities. Margaret O'Brien, previously a secretary at an insurance company in Manhattan, now operated a hydraulic riveting machine that attached wing panels to fuselages. She positioned 312 rivets per aircraft, working with precision that would have taken a pre-war craftsman hours, completing her task in 47 minutes per aircraft. Her single-shift production of 28 wing panel installations exceeded the entire daily output of several German fighter production facilities. Margaret worked alongside 847 other women at Republic's Farmingdale plant, each performing specialized tasks that, when combined, produced industrial output that Germany could not match. James Washington, from Birmingham, Alabama, operated the engine mounting station where the massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 double WASP engine was lifted and secured to each airframe. His station processed 14 engines daily, each producing 2,000 horsepower from 18 cylinders arranged in 2 rows. The engines arrived from Pratt & Whitney's East Hartford facility, which produced 2,800 R2800 engines monthly. His single station's daily output of engine installations exceeded the entire output of several individual German fighter assembly facilities that struggled with chronic shortages of BMW 801 engines. Robert Patterson, $1-a-year man from General Motors, managed production logistics at Republic. He had streamlined American automobile assembly and now applied those same principles to fighter aircraft. Patterson's innovations reduced P-47 assembly time from 3,200 man-hours per aircraft in early 1942 to 1,400 man-hours by January 1943. His methods would eventually reduce assembly time to under 800 man-hours, while German aircraft production remained labor-intensive, averaging over 5,000 man-hours per FW-190. Americans discarded 450 pounds of aluminum scrap daily at the Farmingdale plant alone, metal shavings and rejected components that failed quality control. Germany allocated 220 pounds of aluminum monthly to several smaller repair facilities. The waste from Republic's quality control process exceeded Germany's allocation for keeping damaged fighters operational. The scrap from a single day's production at Republic included 8,200 pounds of aluminum that failed dimensional specifications. Germany's entire monthly allocation for aluminum recycling across 6 facilities totaled 12,000 pounds. Americans threw away in 24 hours nearly what Germany recycled in 30 days. Workers at Republic's cafeteria discarded more food daily than Luftwaffe pilots at forward bases received monthly. The cafeteria served 23,000 workers across 3 shifts, disposing of 1,400 pounds of food waste daily. Luftwaffe bases in occupied France allocated 980 pounds of fresh food monthly to pilot dining facilities. The factory's machine shop generated metal waste that exceeded Germany's strategic reserves. Republic's cutting and milling operations produced 3,400 pounds of steel shavings weekly, waste that could have been recycled into critical components, but was instead sold as scrap. Germany's strategic steel allocation for fighter armament across its entire production network was 2,800 pounds monthly. The ammunition loaded into each P-47 for ferry flights and testing totaled 3,400 rounds across 8 guns. American ordnance facilities produced these rounds as training ammunition, considering it practice material of minimal value. Germany's monthly allocation of machine gun and cannon ammunition for pilot training across the entire Luftwaffe was 2,100 rounds. A single P-47 carried more ammunition for testing than German fighter pilots received for monthly training. Weber visited the Messerschmitt facility at Regensburg in February 1943, compiling data for his intelligence reports. The facility employed 9,200 workers producing 63 Bf-109s monthly. When he included these production statistics in his report comparing American and German output, Hoffman had dismissed it as irrelevant. "Intelligence officers worry too much about numbers," Hoffman said. "Combat pilots worry about killing the enemy. Numbers don't win air battles. Skill and courage win battles." But Weber's numbers told an undeniable story. Republic Aviation's single facility at Farmingdale produced more fighter aircraft monthly than Germany's 3 largest Messerschmitt plants combined. When production expanded to include Curtiss-Wright's Buffalo plant and additional Republic facilities in Evansville, Indiana, American P-47 production would exceed 1,000 aircraft monthly. This output from a single aircraft type would surpass Germany's entire fighter production across all types. The P-47D model, introduced in mid-1943, featured a General Electric turbo-supercharger that enabled the R-2800 engine to maintain full power at altitudes where German fighters gasped for air. At 30,000 feet, the P-47 could still produce maximum power, while FW-190s struggled with reduced performance. The mathematics of engineering combined with the mathematics of production to create overwhelming advantage. April 15, 1943, 22,000 feet above the Belgian coast, 13:47 hours. Lieutenant Franz Kohler was flying defensive patrol over Luftwaffe bomber formations when he encountered the P-47 Thunderbolt for the first time. His FW-190A5 performed flawlessly, climbing through thin clouds at 2,200 feet per minute. The mission was routine: provide top cover for German bombers striking Allied shipping in the Channel. At 13:47 hours, Kohler spotted them, 4 massive aircraft approaching from the west, flying in loose formation at his altitude. The size shocked him. These weren't the sleek P-51s or the twin-engine P-38s. These were enormous, 7-ton fighters that somehow flew like they weighed half that. At 13:49 hours and 20 seconds, the engagement began. The lead turned toward Kohler's formation with shocking speed. At 13:49 hours and 41 seconds, the P-47's 8.50 caliber machine guns opened fire at 600 yards, a range Kohler considered impossibly distant for effective shooting. At 13:49 hours and 53 seconds, Kohler's wingman's FW-190 exploded. Elapsed time from engagement to destruction, 33 seconds. Kohler broke hard left, his FW-190 responding instantly. The P-47 followed. Despite its massive size, the American fighter stayed with him through the turn. At 13:50 hours and 18 seconds, Kohler reversed, attempting to exploit what should have been the P-47's inferior roll rate. At 13:50 hours and 29 seconds, tracers bracketed his canopy. The P-47 had matched his reversal. At 13:50 hours and 44 seconds, Kohler dove, using the FW-190's excellent diving speed to escape. He pushed the stick forward, feeling gravity press him against his harness as the altimeter unwound. At 13:51 hours and 12 seconds, still diving through 18,000 feet, he glanced back. The P-47 was following, not only keeping pace but closing distance. At 13:51 hours and 38 seconds, Kohler pulled out of the dive at 8,000 feet, his airframe groaning under the G-load. At 13:51 hours and 51 seconds, the P-47 pulled out behind him, still in firing position. Kohler's tactical situation had become desperate. He couldn't outrun it. He couldn't outdive it. He couldn't outturn it at high speed. At 13:52 hours and 19 seconds, a second appeared on Kohler's left, perfectly positioned. Kohler was boxed. At 13:52 hours and 27 seconds, both P-47s opened fire. 850 rounds per minute from each of 16.50 caliber machine guns filled the air around Kohler's fighter with 13,600 rounds per minute of combined firepower. At 13:52 hours and 34 seconds, cannon shells from Kohler's number 2 man struck the trailing P-47's wing. The American fighter shuddered but continued firing. At 13:52 hours and 41 seconds, Kohler's number 2's FW-190 disintegrated under concentrated fire from the lead P-47. Kill time, 14 seconds from first shot to destruction. Kohler broke right, desperately looking for escape. At 13:53 hours and 8 seconds, he spotted a cloud bank at 4,000 feet. At 13:53 hours and 33 seconds, he dove for it, both P-47s following. At 13:53 hours and 59 seconds, Kohler entered the clouds, his FW-190 disappearing into white obscurity. Total engagement duration, 6 minutes 39 seconds. German losses, 2 FW-190 aircraft destroyed, 2 pilots killed. American losses, superficial damage to 1 P-47 pilot uninjured. Kill ratio, 2-0. The ammunition expended in this 6-minute engagement exceeded the monthly allocation for an entire Luftwaffe fighter Grupps training program. Kohler flew home alone, his fuel running low, his ammunition expended, his nerves shattered. He had survived 63 combat missions against British Spitfires, Soviet Yak-9s, and American P-40s. He had never been dominated so thoroughly. The P-47 wasn't just a good fighter, it was a revolution. When Kohler landed at 14:21 hours and filed his combat report, his squadron commander dismissed it as combat stress. "The American P-47 is too heavy for dogfighting," the commander stated. "You encountered skilled pilots, that's all." But Kohler had encountered something else. The future of aerial combat. The P-47 combined the firepower of a destroyer, the durability of a tank, and the performance of a pure fighter. Where German fighters carried 500 rounds total for their 20 cannons, the P-47 carried 3,400 rounds for its 8 machine guns. Where FW-190s were delicate machines that required careful handling and frequent maintenance, the P-47 absorbed battle damage that would destroy any German fighter and continued flying. Intelligence dismissed the reports as exaggeration. Hoffman read Kohler's after-action report and scrawled across it, "Pilot error. The FW-190 is superior in all flight regimes. Better training needed." The report was filed and forgotten, but Weber read every encounter report involving P-47s. He compiled them into a single document that painted a disturbing picture. In 17 engagements between April 15 and May 1, 1943, P-47s had destroyed 29 German fighters while losing 3 of their own. The kill ratio was 9-6-1 in favor of the Americans. When Weber presented these statistics to Hoffman, the Oberstleutnant refused to accept them. "Impossible," Hoffman stated flatly. "The FW-190 is aerodynamically superior. The numbers must be wrong." "The numbers come from our own combat reports," Weber replied. "Including Lieutenant Kohler's encounter. He's one of our best pilots and he barely escaped. Kohler made mistakes. The P-47 is a pig, heavy, slow, clumsy. Our pilots will learn to exploit its weaknesses." But the P-47 had no exploitable weaknesses. It was faster than the FW-190 above 15,000 feet. It could outdive any German fighter. Its roll rate matched or exceeded German aircraft. Its firepower was devastating. Its radial engine could absorb damage that would destroy a liquid-cooled engine. Its range exceeded German fighters by hundreds of miles. They tried altitude advantage. The P-47's turbo-supercharger gave it superior performance above 25,000 feet. They attempted diving attacks. The P-47 could dive faster and pull out at lower altitudes. They tried head-on attacks. 8.50 caliber machine guns outgunned anything in the Luftwaffe arsenal. They attempted to exploit the P-47's size, but the big fighter was surprisingly agile, especially at high speeds where it excelled. May 17, 1943, 28,000 feet above the Ruhr Valley, 14:15 hours. Hoffman led a group of 16 FW-190s to intercept American bombers attacking Essen. Intelligence had reported 24 B-17s escorted by P-47s. Hoffman had planned the attack carefully. Approach from the sun, hit the bombers from above and behind, escape before the escorts could react. At 14:15 hours, Hoffman spotted the bomber formation. 24 B-17s in combat box formation, just as intelligence had reported. But the escort wasn't where he expected. 48 P-47s flew top cover at 30,000 feet. Positioned perfectly to intercept any German attack. At 14:16 hours and 30 seconds, Hoffman committed to the attack, diving his formation toward the bombers. At 14:17 hours and 12 seconds, the P-47s dove to intercept, their superior altitude giving them both speed and positional advantage. At 14:17 hours and 44 seconds, Hoffman's lead element opened fire on the B-17 formation. At 14:18 hours and 9 seconds, 16 P-47s tore through Hoffman's formation from above. At 14:18 hours and 27 seconds, the first FW-190 exploded. Kill time, 18 seconds. At 14:18 hours and 53 seconds, a second FW-190 fell burning. Kill time, 26 seconds. Hoffman broke off the attack, his formation scattering. At 14:19 hours and 31 seconds, he attempted to rally his pilots. At 14:20 hours and 6 seconds, a P-47 locked onto his tail. Hoffman performed every evasive maneuver he knew: split-S, barrel roll, hard climbing turn, diving spiral. The P-47 matched every move. At 14:20 hours and 58 seconds, Hoffman's wingman, Major Klaus Richter, attempted to intervene, diving on the P-47, attacking Hoffman. At 14:21 hours and 19 seconds, a second P-47 destroyed Richter's FW-190 with a 3-second burst. Richter, Hoffman's friend of 12 years, 41 victories, veteran of 3 campaigns, died instantly. Elapsed time from engagement to death, 21 seconds. At 14:21 hours and 47 seconds, tracers tore through Hoffman's left wing, shredding control surfaces. At 14:22 hours and 3 seconds, more rounds struck his engine. The BMW 801 coughed, ran rough, then seized. At 14:22 hours and 18 seconds, fire appeared in the engine compartment. At 14:22 hours and 26 seconds, Hoffman released his canopy and prepared to bail out. At 14:22 hours and 34 seconds, he rolled inverted and dropped from his dying fighter. At 14:22 hours and 41 seconds, his parachute deployed. From beneath his parachute, Hoffman watched the engagement continue. The P-47 systematically destroyed his formation. At 14:23 hours, 2 more FW-190s fell. At 14:24 hours, 3 more. The American fighters worked in pairs, one engaging while the other covered, switching roles smoothly, maintaining tactical discipline that Hoffman had never seen from American pilots before. Total engagement duration, 8 minutes 41 seconds. German losses, 11 FW-190s destroyed, 9 pilots killed, 2 captured. American losses, 1 P-47 damaged, pilot returned safely. Kill ratio, 11-0. The ammunition expended by the American fighters in this engagement exceeded the monthly allocation for 3 Luftwaffe fighter Gruppen. The fuel consumed in this engagement exceeded the weekly allocation for an entire German fighter Geschwader. Hoffman landed in a field outside Dortmund. German troops captured him within minutes, not recognizing their own Oberstleutnant in his flight suit. When they finally identified him, they rushed him to headquarters. He arrived at 16:47 hours, his uniform scorched, his face blackened by smoke, his confidence shattered. "The P-47, he told the Geschwader commander. "We can't fight it, not the way it's being employed, not with those numbers." The commander, a friend who had flown with Hoffman over France in 1940, looked at him with concern. "Werner, you're in shock. Rest. We'll discuss this tomorrow." But Hoffman wasn't in shock. He had experienced a revelation. The P-47 wasn't just another Allied fighter. It was a weapon system that combined overwhelming firepower, superior high-altitude performance, robust construction, and increasingly skilled pilots with industrial production that Germany could never match. Weber, reviewing the combat reports from May 17, calculated the loss rate. 11 FW-190s destroyed in a single engagement. Germany produced approximately 700 FW-190s monthly across all production facilities. The Americans had destroyed 1.57% of monthly production in less than 9 minutes. If that loss rate continued, if even half that loss rate continued, the Luftwaffe fighter force would be annihilated within a year. The mathematics were becoming undeniable. Evansville, Indiana, June 1943. Republic Aviation's new Evansville facility achieved full production capacity, adding another 400 P-47s monthly to American output. Combined with Farmingale's 420 monthly and Curtiss-Wright's Buffalo plant producing 180 monthly, American P-47 production reached 1,000 aircraft monthly. This single fighter type's production exceeded Germany's total fighter production across all types. At Evansville, workers assembled P-47s using methods refined at Farmingdale. The production line employed 18,400 workers operating 2 shifts. Every 87 minutes, another P-47 rolled off the line. This facility alone produced more fighter aircraft than Germany's top 5 production plants combined. Americans discarded entire engines that failed acceptance testing. Pratt & Whitney's quality control rejected 93 R2800 engines monthly for minor defects. These rejected engines, which would have been considered acceptable by German standards, were scrapped or recycled. Germany's entire monthly production of BMW 801 engines was 840 units. Americans threw away what Germany would have desperately used. The aluminum waste from Evansville's daily production exceeded Germany's monthly allocation for repairs across the entire Luftwaffe. Evansville generated 12,300 pounds of aluminum scrap daily. Germany allocated 9,800 pounds monthly for fighter repairs across all operational units. Workers at Evansville's cafeteria served 18,400 employees, disposing of 1,100 pounds of food waste daily. Luftwaffe ground crews at forward bases received 760 pounds of fresh food monthly for their mess facilities. The hydraulic fluid wasted during production testing exceeded Germany's strategic reserves. American production facilities tested each P-47's hydraulic systems, discarding 3.7 gallons of fluid per aircraft if it showed any contamination. Evansville's monthly waste of hydraulic fluid totaled 4,440 gallons. Germany's strategic reserve of hydraulic fluid for the entire Luftwaffe in June 1943 was 3,200 gallons. The propeller assemblies rejected by American quality control would have equipped Germany's entire fighter force. Republic and Curtiss-Wright rejected 117 propeller assemblies monthly for dimensional tolerance violations. Germany's monthly requirement for fighter propellers across all types was 720 units. Americans threw away what would have been 16% of Germany's monthly requirement. The electrical wiring scrapped during production exceeded Germany's monthly allocation. American facilities discarded 840 pounds of copper wire monthly that failed continuity testing. Germany allocated 620 pounds of copper wire monthly for fighter repairs across all operational units. Weber compiled these production statistics into a comprehensive report titled American Industrial Capacity and Implications for Air Defense of the Reich. The report documented American production of all fighter types, P-47s, P-51s, P-38s, P-40s. The total exceeded 6,000 fighters monthly. German production across all types averaged 1,200 monthly. "We are not fighting an air force," Weber wrote in his report. "We are fighting an industrial system that produces aircraft faster than we can destroy them. We are fighting a nation that wastes more than we produce." The report reached Luftwaffe High Command in July 1943. It was filed without action. The prevailing view remained that German pilot skill and aircraft quality would overcome American quantity. The mathematics of production were dismissed as irrelevant compared to the mathematics of combat. July 30, 1943. 25,000 feet above Kassel, Germany. 13:56 hours. Kohler led a staffel of 8 FW-190s to intercept American bombers attacking aircraft production facilities at Kassel. His formation climbed through scattered clouds, engines straining against the thin air. At 13:56 hours, he spotted the American formation. 36 B-17 bombers escorted by 56 P-47 Thunderbolts. The mathematics were brutal before the first shot was fired. 8 German fighters against 56 American fighters. 7-to-1 numerical superiority favoring the Americans. But Kohler's orders were absolute: stop the bombers from reaching the factories. At 13:58 hours and 12 seconds, Kohler's formation attacked the bomber formation from the front quarter, attempting to disrupt the bombing run. At 13:58 hours and 47 seconds, 12 P-47s dove to intercept. At 13:59 hours and 23 seconds, the first FW-190 exploded under concentrated fire. Kill time, 36 seconds. At 1400 hours and 9 seconds, Kohler destroyed a B-17 with a perfect deflection shot, his cannons tearing through the bomber's cockpit. At 1400 hours and 41 seconds, a P-47 locked onto Kohler's tail. At 14:01 hours and 18 seconds, Kohler's wingman warned him over the radio. Brake right now." Kohler broke hard, his FW-190 snapping into a violent turn. At 14:01 hours and 37 seconds, tracers streamed past his canopy, so close he could see individual rounds. At 14:01 hours and 58 seconds, his wingman's FW-190 disintegrated. Kill time, 17 seconds. At 14:02 hours and 44 seconds, Kohler dove for clouds at 15,000 feet. At 14:03 hours and 19 seconds, 2 P-47s followed him into the dive, their superior diving speed allowing them to close distance. At 14:03 hours and 56 seconds, Kohler pulled out at 8,000 feet, his airframe groaning. At 14:04 hours and 28 seconds, both P-47s pulled out behind him, still in firing position. At 14:05 hours and 13 seconds, a third appeared ahead of Kohler, climbing to meet him head-on. At 14:05 hours and 39 seconds, Kohler and the P-47 opened fire simultaneously. At 14:05 hours and 44 seconds, cannon shells struck the P-47's cowling and wing root. At 14:05 hours and 46 seconds, .50 caliber rounds tore through Kohler's left wing and cockpit. At 14:05 hours and 51 seconds, Kohler's canopy shattered. At 14:05 hours and 54 seconds, his control stick went slack as hydraulic lines severed. At 14:05 hours and 58 seconds, fire appeared in his cockpit. At 14:06 hours and 3 seconds, Kohler released his harness and attempted to bail out. At 14:06 hours and 7 seconds, slipstream forces tore him from the cockpit. At 14:06 hours and 13 seconds, his parachute deployed, damaged but functional. Total engagement duration, 7 minutes 49 seconds. German losses, 7 FW-190s destroyed, 6 pilots killed, 1 wounded. American losses, 2 B-17s destroyed, 1 P-47 damaged, returned to base. Kill ratio of fighters, 7-0. The bomber raid continued, hitting the Castle factories and destroying production capacity for 47 FW-190s. Kohler landed near Göttingen, his left arm broken, his face lacerated by canopy fragments. German troops rushed him to a military hospital. He arrived at 15:34 hours, in shock but alive. He had survived his first bailout. He had faced the P-47 twice now and survived twice. Most German pilots didn't get a second chance. In the hospital, recovering from his wounds, Kohler wrote a detailed after-action report describing the engagement. "The American P-47 is not a fighter aircraft," he wrote. "It is a flying weapon platform that combines the firepower of ground artillery with the speed and altitude performance of an interceptor. We cannot defeat it with current tactics or current aircraft. We are outgunned, outproduced, and increasingly outskilled." The report reached Weber's desk in August 1943. Weber added it to his growing file of P-47 encounters. The pattern was undeniable. Every engagement showed the same result: catastrophic German losses, minimal American casualties. The kill ratios were approaching 10-1 in some engagements. Weber prepared another report for Luftwaffe High Command. This one was more urgent. Request immediate evaluation of American P-47 Thunderbolt fighter. Current German tactics ineffective. Loss rates unsustainable. Recommend development of new aircraft or withdrawal of daylight fighter operations. The report was acknowledged and filed. No action was taken. The prevailing view at High Command remained that German pilots simply needed to fight harder, fly smarter, and maintain confidence. The mathematics of industrial production continued to be dismissed as irrelevant, but the mathematics were about to become impossible to ignore. Omaha, Nebraska, September 1943. The Glenn L. Martin Company's bomber plant achieved record production, 16 B-26 Marauders daily. But the facility's machine shop also produced components for P-47 production, including propeller blade forgings, landing gear assemblies, and structural reinforcements. The excess capacity of American industry was so vast that a bomber factory could produce fighter components as a secondary operation. This single facility's fighter component production exceeded several German facilities' entire output. Martin's propeller blade forging operation produced 340 blades monthly as a side operation. Germany's primary propeller production facility at Schwäbisch Gmünd produced 420 blades monthly as its primary mission. Americans discarded more aviation fuel daily than Germany refined weekly. American refineries produced 82 million gallons of aviation gasoline daily. American training operations consumed 47 million gallons daily. American waste, spillage, and rejected batches totaled 2.3 million gallons daily. Germany's total refining capacity for aviation fuel was 8.9 million gallons weekly. The ammunition produced daily for fighter aircraft training exceeded Germany's monthly combat allocation. American ammunition plants produced 4.7 million rounds of .50 caliber ammunition daily. American training operations consumed 2.8 million rounds daily. Germany's monthly allocation of 20 cannon ammunition for combat operations was 1.9 million rounds. The rubber waste from landing gear tire production exceeded Germany's strategic reserves. American facilities produced 840 fighter aircraft tires daily, rejecting 93 for quality defects, and wearing out another 47 during landing gear testing. The rubber waste totaled 1,840 pounds daily. Germany's strategic rubber reserve for all military operations in September 1943 was 42,000 pounds. The copper waste from electrical system production exceeded Germany's monthly allocation for repairs. American facilities discarded 2,700 pounds of copper wire daily that failed quality testing. Germany allocated 1,900 pounds of copper monthly for electrical system repairs across the entire Luftwaffe. This excess, this waste, this casual disposal of materials that Germany desperately needed represented more than industrial capacity. It represented the fundamental difference between economies. America produced so much that waste was acceptable. Germany produced so little that everything was precious. Weber's September report included detailed comparisons of American waste versus German production. The comparisons were stark. American daily waste of aluminum, 47,000 pounds across all aircraft production facilities. German monthly production of aluminum for fighter aircraft, 52,000 pounds. American daily waste of aviation fuel, 2.3 million gallons. German daily production of aviation fuel, 1.27 million gallons. American daily waste of .50 caliber ammunition, 340,000 rounds rejected in quality control. German daily production of 20 cannon ammunition, 63,000 rounds. We are not fighting an enemy, Weber concluded in his report. We are fighting an industrial colossus that produces more waste than we produce materiel. October 14, 1943. 27,000 feet above Schweinfurt, Germany. 14:23 hours. This was the day the mathematics became undeniable. The second Schweinfurt raid brought 291 American B-17 bombers to attack ball-bearing factories deep in Germany. Luftwaffe High Command had ordered maximum effort. Every available fighter would attack the bombers. Hoffmann, recovered from his May bailout and returned to limited duty, coordinated the defense from a ground station. He watched as 300 German fighters rose to intercept. Bf-109, FW-190s, even twin-engine Bf-110s pressed into desperate service as bomber-destroyers. But the Americans had brought 240 P-47 escorts, flying at maximum range, their massive internal fuel capacity stretched to the limit. The P-47s couldn't escort the bombers all the way to Schweinfurt, but they could escort them deep into Germany, much deeper than any previous mission. At 14:23 hours, the air battle began. At 14:25 hours, the first German fighters fell. At 14:27 hours, the kill count reached 5 German fighters destroyed. At 14:31 hours, 10 more. At 14:38 hours, the P-47s reached their maximum range and turned back, leaving the bombers to continue alone. The German fighters, bloodied but not broken, pressed their attacks. Between 14:38 hours and 15:47 hours, German pilots displayed extraordinary courage, making repeated attacks despite losses. They destroyed 60 American bombers, a catastrophic loss. But then the P-47s returned, meeting the bomber formation as it withdrew. Between 15:47 hours and 16:29 hours, the P-47s tore through the German fighters with systematic precision. At 15:47 hours, the renewed combat began. At 15:51 hours, German fighters started falling at a rate of 1 every 2 minutes. At 16:04 hours, the loss rate increased to 1 every 90 seconds. At 16:11 hours and 38 seconds, Oberstleutnant Werner Hoffmann, flying against direct orders because his pilots were dying, engaged a P-47 that had just destroyed 2 FW-190s. Hoffmann, the mocker, the ace who had dismissed American capabilities, the veteran of 3 campaigns, made his attack approach perfectly. At 16:11 hours and 56 seconds, Hoffmann opened fire at 400 yards. At 16:12 hours and 9 seconds, his cannon shells struck the P-47's wing and fuselage. The American fighter shuddered but continued flying. At 16:12 hours and 27 seconds, the P-47 reversed, bringing its 8.50 caliber guns to bear. At 16:12 hours and 41 seconds, 8 streams of tracers converged on Hoffman's FW-190. At 16:12 hours and 44 seconds, the canopy shattered. At 16:12 hours and 46 seconds, engine failure. At 16:12 hours and 48 seconds, fire in the cockpit. Hoffman, who had survived 64 combat missions, who had 47 victories, who had laughed at American capabilities 7 months earlier, died at 16:12 hours and 50 seconds when his aircraft exploded. Elapsed time from engagement to death, 54 seconds. Total engagement duration for the entire mission, 2 hours, 6 minutes. German losses: 38 fighters destroyed, 29 pilots killed. American fighter losses: 3 P-47s destroyed. Kill ratio: 12:6:1. The ammunition expended by American fighters in this 2-hour engagement exceeded the monthly allocation for the entire Luftwaffe fighter forces training program. The fuel consumed exceeded Germany's weekly production. Weber received the casualty reports that evening. Hoffman's name appeared on the list. The mocker was dead, killed by the very weapon he had dismissed. Weber had tried to warn him. The statistics had been clear since April, but Hoffman had believed in German superiority until a P-47's guns proved otherwise. Kohler, still recovering from his August wounds, received the news of Hoffman's death. The man who had called the P-47 too heavy for dogfighting had been destroyed by one in less than a minute. The mathematics had caught up with German confidence. The second Schweinfurt raid was reported as a German victory because 60 American bombers had been destroyed. But the true mathematics told a different story. The Americans lost 600 airmen, but damaged ball-bearing production by 38% for 3 months. Germany lost 38 fighters and 29 irreplaceable experienced pilots. America would replace the lost bombers in 4 days of production. Germany would replace the fighters in 6 days, but would never replace the pilots' experience. More significantly, the Americans learned from Schweinfurt. They would develop better tactics, longer-range escorts, and more effective bomber formations. Germany learned nothing because the mockers, the men who dismissed American capabilities, kept dying before they could change their minds. November 1943. Luftwaffe Interrogation Center, Frankfurt. Weber sat across from a captured P-47 pilot, First Lieutenant Robert Harrison from Des Moines, Iowa. Harrison had been shot down during a mission over Munster, his P-47 crippled by concentrated fire from 4 FW-190s. He had bilayed out successfully and been captured within hours. "How many missions have you flown?" Weber asked in careful English. 14, Harrison replied. "How many aircraft have you destroyed?" 4 confirmed, 2 probable. Weber made notes. 4 victories in 14 missions. An average German pilot needed 50 missions to achieve 4 victories. This American had done it in 14. "Tell me about your training," Weber requested. Harrison described the American training pipeline. Primary flight training, 9 weeks. Basic flight training, 10 weeks. Advanced flight training, 10 weeks. Transition to P-47, 4 weeks. Gunnery training, 3 weeks. Total training time, 36 weeks before combat deployment. German fighter pilot training in late 1943 had been reduced to 12 weeks total due to fuel shortages and aircraft shortages. American pilots arrived in combat with 3 times the training of German pilots. "How many hours in aircraft?" Weber asked. "About 320 hours total, maybe 60 in the P-47 before my first mission." German pilots were arriving at operational units with 100 hours total flight time. American pilots had triple that before seeing combat. "One more question," Weber said. "When you were shot down, how many rounds did you have remaining?" "Maybe 800 rounds. We fire in short bursts. The guns are so effective you don't need long bursts." Weber calculated quickly. Harrison had expended 2,600 rounds in combat. Germany's monthly allocation for pilot training was 2,100 rounds. This single American pilot had fired more ammunition in one mission than German pilots received for an entire month of training. December 1943. Luftwaffe Operations Center, Berlin. Weber presented his final comprehensive report to Luftwaffe High Command. The report ran to 247 pages, documenting every aspect of American fighter production and employment. The statistics painted an undeniable picture. American P-47 production, 1,000 monthly. German FW-190 production, 700 monthly. American P-51 production, the new long-range fighter, 400 monthly and increasing. American P-38 production, 380 monthly. Total American fighter production, 2,100 monthly across all types. Total German fighter production, 1,200 monthly across all types. We are being outproduced 2-1, Weber stated to the assembled officers. But production is only part of the problem. We are also being out-trained, out-equipped, and out-sustained. American pilot training, 36 weeks, 320 hours flight time. German pilot training, 12 weeks, 100 hours flight time. American fighter ammunition load. P-47 carries 3,400 rounds. German fighter ammunition load. FW-190 carries 500 rounds of 20. American fighter range. P-47 escorts bombers 475 miles from base. German fighter range. FW-190 operates 240 miles from base. The kill ratios confirm American superiority, Weber continued. In October, P-47s achieved a 12-1 kill ratio. In November, 14-1, the trend is accelerating. What do you recommend? A general asked. Immediate withdrawal from daylight fighter operations, Weber replied. Concentrate on night fighting where our technology provides advantage. Develop jet aircraft to restore technological superiority. Except that we cannot win a production war against American industry. The recommendations were rejected. Germany would continue daylight fighter operations. Germany would accept catastrophic losses. Germany would continue fighting an enemy that outproduced, out-trained, and out-equipped them because the alternative was admitting the mathematics of defeat. Weber's report was filed. He was reassigned to administrative duties, his warnings dismissed as defeatist. The war would continue for another 16 months, and the mathematics would only get worse. January 1944. Luftwaffe Field Hospital, Bavaria. Kohler recovered from his wounds and returned to flight duty, visited Weber before returning to his squadron. The two men had become friends through correspondence during Kohler's recovery. They represented different aspects of the same truth. Kohler had experienced American superiority in combat. Weber had documented it statistically. They're sending me back to operations, Kohler said. 3rd Staffel defending München. The P-51s are arriving now, Weber replied. They escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. The P-47s operate closer to the border, but there are hundreds of them. I know, I've read the intelligence reports. You don't have to go back. Your wounds qualify you for ground duty. Kohler shook his head. My pilots are up there, young men with 100 hours of training facing American pilots with 300 hours. Someone needs to teach them how to survive. Can they survive? Can anyone survive against those odds? Maybe, if they're smart, if they're lucky, if they avoid combat when possible and fight only when they have advantage. Kohler paused. We're not fighting to win anymore, we're fighting to survive. The Americans have already won, they just don't know it yet. Weber nodded. The mathematics became undeniable 6 months ago. Everything since then is just confirmation. The two men shook hands. Kohler returned to his squadron. He would fly 37 more missions, survive 4 more bailouts, and ultimately surrender to American forces in May 1945. Weber would survive the war in his administrative post, his warnings vindicated but too late to matter. Hoffmann, the mocker, was dead, killed by the weapon he had dismissed. His mistake had been the Luftwaffe's mistake. Believing that quality could defeat quantity, that skill could overcome production, that confidence could substitute for capacity. The P-47 Thunderbolt and its 8.50 caliber machine guns had proven otherwise. The massive fighter that Hoffmann called too heavy for dogfighting achieved a kill ratio of 4-6, 1 across the entire war, destroying 3,752 German aircraft while losing 824 to all causes. The FW-190 that Hoffmann called superior was systematically destroyed, with 20,000 built but more than 15,000 lost in combat. May 1945. American Interrogation Center, Wiesbaden. Weber sat across from American intelligence officers answering questions about German fighter operations. The war was over. Germany had surrendered. The mathematics had reached their inevitable conclusion. When did you realize you would lose? The American colonel asked. April 1943, Weber replied. The first P-47 encounters. The production statistics were already clear, but the combat results confirmed them. Why didn't Germany change tactics? We tried. I submitted 17 reports between April 1943 and December 1943 recommending tactical changes, production priorities, and strategic withdrawals. All were rejected or ignored. Why? Weber considered the question. Because accepting the reports meant accepting that we were inferior, not just in production, but in systems, in training, and sustainability. German leadership preferred to believe in superiority until the evidence became overwhelming. When did the evidence become overwhelming? For me, April 1943. For most officers, never. Many died still believing in German superiority. They blamed pilot error, bad luck, or circumstances. They never accepted that American industrial capacity and systematic approach to warfare were superior. The American colonel consulted his notes. "You documented American waste in your reports. The waste statistics are remarkable." "Americans discarded more than we produced," Weber confirmed. "A single American factory's waste exceeded our strategic reserves. It wasn't just production capacity, it was excess capacity. America could afford to be wasteful because your production was so vast that waste was irrelevant." Kohler, also being interrogated at Wiesbaden, told the Americans about his combat experiences. He described 6 encounters with P-47s over 14 months of operations. "The P-47 wasn't just a fighter," Kohler explained. "It was a weapon system that combined firepower, protection, and performance. We had nothing comparable." "The FW-190 was considered excellent," the American interrogator noted. "It was excellent, but the P-47 was revolutionary. Your 8.50 caliber guns could destroy our aircraft in seconds. Your armor protected your pilots from our 20 cannons. Your turbo supercharger gave you altitude superiority. Your production gave you numerical superiority. We were fighting with swords against machine guns." Both Weber and Kohler mentioned the same theme. American excess capacity exceeded German maximum effort. The Americans could lose aircraft and replace them in days. Germany lost aircraft and struggled to replace them in weeks. The Americans trained pilots for 320 hours before combat. Germany trained pilots for 100 hours. The Americans fired more ammunition in training than Germany allocated for combat. "We were not defeated by better soldiers," Weber stated in his final interrogation session. "We were defeated by better factories. American production destroyed German capabilities. The P-47 was simply the most visible example of that production superiority." The interrogation reports confirmed what American intelligence had suspected. Germany had recognized American superiority as early as April 1943, but had been unable or unwilling to adapt. The mathematics of production had doomed Germany, but German leadership had refused to accept mathematical reality until defeat was complete. The final mathematics, the P-47 Thunderbolt, proved that industrial democracy outproduces totalitarian command. Free workers at Republic Aviation, Curtiss-Wright, and Evansville built 15,683 P-47s. Forced labor and enslaved workers in Germany built 20,051 FW-190s across all variants, but the FW-190 entered service earlier and remained in production longer. On a monthly basis, American P-47 production exceeded German FW-190 production by 30%. Democratic cooperation exceeded authoritarian efficiency. American factories produced fighters at 1,400 man-hours per aircraft. German factories required 5,000 man-hours per aircraft. American workers, paid fair wages and working by choice, outproduced German workers by 3.51 per man-hour. Industrial abundance buried ideological superiority under the weight of production statistics. America's excess capacity exceeded Germany's maximum effort. American waste surpassed German strategic reserves. American training expenditures exceeded German combat allocations. March 15, 1943. Hoffman had laughed at the P-47 in a comfortable operations center in France. October 14, 1943. Hoffman died in the cockpit of his FW-190, shot down by a P-47's 8.50 caliber machine guns. His mockery became history's most expensive miscalculation, measured in the lives of 15,000 German pilots who died believing in superiority that statistics had already disproven. The lesson remains: dismissing democratic nations as weak because they prefer peace, or underestimating free people's productive capacity when mobilized for war, invites catastrophic miscalculation. The P-47 Thunderbolt, with its 8.50 caliber machine guns and 7-ton airframe, demonstrated that industrial might combined with democratic determination creates military power that no amount of tactical skill or ideological fervor can overcome. The mathematics were undeniable from the beginning. They simply required blood and fire to prove themselves to those who refused to accept numbers on paper. If you're enjoying this story, please consider subscribing to hear more stories like this.